The All-Star rosters are an interesting concept, and I say interesting, and I mean bad. I think that you and I were both pretty disappointed when the All-Star rosters dropped yesterday. With the starters, obviously there's fan voting, so you're going to get some mix-ups. Some of the more popular players are going to get on there when I think they shouldn't, like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. starting over Ty France. And then you assume that the second part, when they build out the benches, that's when the players who really deserve it are going to, get paid their dues. They're going to be recognized for how well they've been playing. But that still disappointed us as well. So, just as an example, Ty France doesn't get the start over Vlad Guerrero Jr. Fan voting can be a popularity contest, but now he's also not going to be on the bench. He didn't even make the All-Star team. That kind of stuff is disappointing. So we put out a tweet yesterday about our biggest All-Star Game snubs. We can kind of go one by one, or I can list them all off and then we can talk about them. But first of all, it starts with Ty France. Both of you and I had him starting the All-Star Game. He doesn't make the roster. He's been injured, but he still played over 70 games so far. He's been hitting better than, I think, Luis Arraez and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Just disappointing that a guy who's maybe been one of the better hitters in baseball doesn't make the All-Star team, especially when he's on a team like the Mariners, and he's still been producing all year. Then Carlos Rodon, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, a couple pitchers in the National League that it's just surprising to see left off that list. Rodon leads the National League pitchers in WAR, has the best FIP in the National League, fresh off a complete game, one-run game against the San Diego Padres. We also got Dylan Cease, Kevin Gausman as some pitchers in the American League, and then we can figure out the back half of that list. But those are kind of, I think, the big marquee names, guys that were left off. Where do you want to start? Because there were a lot of snubs this year.
I think, just in the American League, I think the biggest, I don't want to say problem, but I think fix that can be made to the American League is, I think Shohei shouldn't be taking up two spots there. I mean, he got the starting DH as well as voted in as a starting pitcher, which then he's already an All-Star, and then that takes away from a Dylan Cease or a Kevin Gausman who could have then been an All-Star. And I get it's like, oh, well, he was an All-Star hitter as well as an All-Star pitcher, so recognize him in two spots. But, it takes away from another guy who also deserved it. And, I think Dylan Cease is the biggest name for me in the AL, or a biggest pitcher name in the AL that should have been on there for me. He's had an incredible season so far, and I think he should have been an All-Star. And, you talked about Ty France. He deserved to be there as well. And those are, like, the two biggest names, I think, in the AL. Because, you can go down the list, and what we do is, we list off all these guys who have been putting up All-Star caliber seasons. But, the reality is not all of them can make it. But in these cases, these are guys that are better than some of the names that are on there. So they should have made it. Like I said, there are guys that might be left off, but that has to happen. But these guys were kind of truly snubbed.
Well, and I think if you ask Shohei, you're like, okay, you're already an All-Star. Do you want to take up two spots, or you want to take up one spot and let someone else also make the roster? Like, I think we could all tell from the way Shohei behaves and his personality, he wants to see other people represented. I'm pretty sure everyone in baseball would rather take up one spot than two, so that all of the guys that they play with and compete against get a chance to be on the All-Star roster. And Cease, I don't think I actually found a way to get him on my roster, but when we saw the actual ones get dropped, and you see Nestor Cortez in there over Cease, obviously Martin Perez is there too. He's the only Ranger on the team, but there's definitely some American League pitchers that I wouldn't have put over Dylan Cease, and there are definitely American League hitters I wouldn't have put over Ty France, who you and I had starting the game. Again, there's a chance that some of these guys get voted in late, or added on if players are injured or starting pitchers can't pitch. We're fingers crossed for Cease to be able to make it on the team. If one guy can't pitch, he'll get the reins as an All-Star. But also in the National League, we had three pitchers, I think, that all had All-Star game cases. Two of them in Wheeler and Rodon, I think, absolutely should have been All-Stars. And then you could also make the case for Aaron Nola. What do you think about those three National League pitchers?
I think Rodon is the biggest one. I was thinking about it. What I kind of came to is I think Tyler Stevenson should have been the Reds over d'Arnaud as the backup catcher, and then Rodon should have got there over Luis Castillo, who hasn't been all that great. Even started the season late and missed a handful of starts. And Rodon has been better than Castillo, and I know Castillo was the Reds one, but I think even Brandon Drury as a reserve could have been the Reds. I think Brandon Drury, you could talk about as a snub just in general, not just being as the Reds representative. So I think Rodon is the biggest one. But, I mean, National League pitching has been wonderful, and I think the ERA was, when comparison of the starters in the NL that made the All-Star team, I think their ERA is like a 2.1, 2.2. So, I mean, the pitching in the NL has been loaded. So, like we said, there's some guys like Nola, Wheeler, I think maybe they had to be left off, as much as it sucks because they've been so great. But I think Rodon was the guy who's like truly a snub and definitely should have been there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it feels like, to me, there was kind of a low number of starting pitchers in the National League, too. I think they only put 7 in. And I don't know why. It just felt a little small considering when we made our rosters. But yeah, I think Rodon should have been in there. You know, yes, Castillo had to be a Reds rep. I think you're right. Brandon Drury, maybe even better than Tyler Stevenson, could have been on that roster. And then put in one more starting pitcher. I also think, I mean, Rodon's been better than Max Fried so far this year. We can get into your thoughts about Brian Snitker being the manager and some of the Braves that made the team, but I think that there were other ways to configure the roster. I mean, Rodon's number 1 in WAR in the National League among pitchers, Kevin Gausman number 1 in WAR among AL pitchers, and both those guys don't make the All-Star roster. Cease is up there too, so it's interesting. I never really liked the way they put together all-star rosters. You and I had a discussion yesterday about whether Clayton Kershaw deserves to be there over some of these other guys, considering he's thrown, 40 less innings than Rodon, 50 plus less innings than Nola. I think it's like 35 less innings than Zach Wheeler. Of course, the game's in LA, so he is pitching at an all-star level when he's on the field, but considering that he's been on the field for what would amount to like 4 or 5 nearly less games than these other pitchers if they're pitching 8 or 9 innings, it's an interesting discussion and one that maybe we should have here as well.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on real quick. You mentioned there was less starters, it seemed like, in the NL. That's because when we did our list, we had however many starters and only 3 relievers. The NL has 5 relievers, so I mean that takes away from 2 guys, 2 more spots potentially starting pitching that would have gotten in years past, that because we based it off kind of years past what the rosters have looked like. And I mean, maybe there's stronger relievers this year, but I mean with Kershaw though, I'm biased, so I he deserves to be there. I think in the less innings you can talk about, but I think there's a point where you draw the line, because maybe not Rodon as substantial, but between Wheeler and Nola, Kershaw's been noticeably, not significantly, but noticeably better in terms of stat-wise. And so, like, and still has enough innings. Like, it's not like he's only made 3 or 4 starts and had just a few good starts and he's looked like vintage Kershaw. Like, he's put together a great season and just missed a couple starts. So I just think there's got to be a point where you draw the line between a guy who's been better but less innings than a guy who's been worse but more innings. So and like Rodon there, it's kind of give or take stats wise. Kershaw's better in some, Rodon's better in others. So I mean, maybe a guy like that you could put Rodon over him. But yeah, I definitely think the All-Star game being in LA had something to do with it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that Kershaw doesn't deserve to be an all-star. I just think in years like this where you see these 3 guys, or even if you don't want to include Nola or Wheeler, like guys that are left off the team that we all agree should be all-stars, and then you see Kershaw with the less innings making it over them, I think that's when it stings a little bit more. That's when the discussion should be maybe a little bit louder. Let's go over some other snubs. We had Tommy Edman in the National League, one of the highest or the most valuable players playing offensively and defensively in the NL. We already mentioned Brandon Drury, Will Smith, who I know that one kind of rubbed you the wrong way with d'Arnaud making it over Smith. Also then Josh Bell and Freddie Freeman, tough for the NL first baseman. But yeah, those are some other snubs. Of course, there were more, but you can't mention every single one. I mean, I think Taylor Ward's a guy that we were like, yeah, he's kind of snubbed as well. But again, these rosters, you're taking an entire league and combining it into 2 teams. So some people are going to get left off, but these are the ones that kind of stung the most.
Yeah, I think the majority of those guys. I was upset about Will Smith not making over Darno. Will Smith has been, when you go down the list of stats, Will Smith is leading in the majority, if not almost all of them. So I was upset about that one as a Dodger fan because, Will Smith has been kind of widely considered a top 2 or 3 catcher in Major League Baseball the last few years and has yet to be an All-Star. So I wanted him to have an All-Star appearance, and the other guys, the majority of them are guys that maybe would make it in years past, but it's a good team, and some guys are just naturally going to be left off, like you said. And we've focused on all the snubs, but at the end of the day, it's exciting for all these All-Stars. There's a lot of first-year All-Stars this season, which is good to see. And we focused on the negative guys that should be there, but it's also exciting for the guys that are there.
Yeah, to kind of round it out, if you want to go see what we deemed to be the perfect All-Star rosters 2 weeks ago in an episode, you can go to our page. I'll link it right here as well up in the top corner. We researched, we put our own rosters together. Those are the guys that we think are deserving of being on the team. But also, you're right, congratulations to all of the first-time All-Stars, all the guys who were there for the umpteenth time. You had Albert Pujols, possibly could even be making a start at DH. Miguel Cabrera in the AL, as those are the 2 commissioner votes in. So good to see all these players getting represented. Just wish, it worked out perfectly. But then again, as you mentioned, such small rosters for such a big league, it's hard to get everyone there and everyone who deserves it.